The journey begins. Day 2, June 2nd, 2024. The problems with our current reality. The current state of reality reveals to us that there are potentially some issues, some problems, and it mainly boils down to this discrepancy between what we believe or what we feel that life could become and what life actually is. This difference between the dream state or the state of bliss or state of being in love, or generally the state of when life feels great compared to when life does not feel great. In general, most people can determine the difference between good and bad, and these are the type of things, the problems are the type of things that fall into the when life is bad type of situation. Because in general, in order to say there is a problem, one must compare to why is that a problem compared to some better thing? And in this case, the better thing is often what we imagine that life could be like, or in general, the state of when life is better. And in this case, a lot of people also agree on what things in life are problems. As we go through this list, it will become apparent that most of these are not totally subjective. A lot of them are pretty much common things that are problems, and it's a list that I've developed, but is not necessarily an entirely long list or in any particular list or order that of importance. But one of the key problems that I see is a lack of purpose or a sense of meaninglessness. And to me, this is a problem because perhaps meaning and purpose are only generated by us, like they're completely man-made things. And so we're like, okay, but if they are man-made, then why can't we make more? Why doesn't everyone just make their own purpose and make their own meaning? And why do we have to question those type of things? But it would seem that also there could potentially be a grander purpose, a purpose outside of man-made purpose. But either way, the fact that we don't have, that not everyone has purpose or has meaning or has a sense of living a life that has meaning in the world, means that is a problem, either way. And then there are a lot of bad things that happen to people, and these are like the problems that I'm talking about. Domestic abuse. This is a problem that happens around the world. There's all types of slavery that still happen. This includes trafficking and other types of slavery. We have discrimination and bias. We have starvation, or people being anxious about where their food's going to come from, or the inability to get quality, nutritious food. This is not really questioned. There are people that don't have access to good food or to good drinking water. And we have wars that are going on. This very moment, likely, there's a war going on somewhere in the world. People being cheated or scammed. This is like when you get cheated or scammed, you just get this pit in the bottom of your stomach and it just feels horrible. And you're like, why would people do this to other people? But this is a problem. There are people that live in rough conditions around the world, whether because they're in a third world country and they don't have access to the clean water and the food, or just living in an inner city or in a rural house that's very poor, and so they don't have adequate living conditions, and so they just live in these rough conditions. Maybe they create their own rough conditions to live in, or maybe they were born into this situation. Either way, living in rough conditions is so much of a problem compared to living in wonderful conditions. We have persecution, and this gets tricky because a lot of times persecution is because of the way a person did things. So say that a person goes to jail, you could say that that's persecution depending on what they're going for, if the thing they're going for is not actually called for. And I think this is a big question that's going to be hard to answer given the question of free will and other questions like that. Then you have addictions, which pretty much by definition means that people don't really want to be addicted to these things, but they are, and they're pretty much and they can be destroying their life. These are things like drugs and alcohol and smoking and potentially caffeine or just sugar in general. Then you have poor health, which is a huge spectrum of problems. And this is a problem, and this is an easy thing to see because when we're in good health, we're feeling great, we often forget about all the problems that we could have. But when we're in bad health, life is just so much harder to get by in, and we're constantly thinking about the bad health and how much better life could be. That's the sort of state where we recognize that life could be so much better, and so we often work hard to get into that better state, to get healthy again. And I think you could draw an analogy between that and what I'm talking about in general with all of these problems. But specifically, that could be cancer, obesity, and mental health. There's so many health problems, and for the most part, a lot of times they're getting worse. Although we're making some advancements, a lot of times people nowadays are pretty unhealthy, and they go through lives being tired and worn out and not feeling that great. And you have unkindness, which is sort of a general term, but in general, I think it is true that there are people that are unkind. Yet we're all human, and for the most part, people that think logically and whatnot, they're like, it's not good to be unkind to other people, or it doesn't feel good when people are not kind to me. And yet it happens all the time, and it's like why? If everyone just stopped being unkind to each other, then everyone could be kind to each other. But that's not the way the world currently is, but so it seems like that would be a problem. Then you have people having to work mundane lives, and this could be a boring 9 to 5. This could be another job that's just horrible, that like horrible conditions, or perhaps this is a job that you just don't like, you would rather be doing something else. And so to me, that's a problem. If someone wants to go do something else besides working 9 to 5 all the time, like spending time with their family, but they can't, that would seem to be a problem with society or reality in general. And we can imagine there are some people who don't have to work 9 to 5s all the time, and so there would seem to be that discrepancy, which would seem to present a problem. The world's resources being used unsustainably, and natural environments being destroyed, animal species going away because of basically rough living conditions, because of what the world is turning into. We have forever chemicals, we have plastics, and in general, people understand that the world isn't being treated that great. Like the earth itself, we're kind of polluting it a lot. We're kind of using its resources unsustainably. And so that would seem to be a problem. And you could even go farther with other potential really devastating things that are going to happen, potentially because we're not taking very good care of the earth. And so that would seem to be a problem. And you have clean water, which could relate to people or animals, or in general the cycle of water. And you have not enough energy in the world and clean energy in the world, and so you have people that have to be rationed on how much energy they can use, or just energy is so expensive that they can't really use that much, and so their living conditions tend to be worse. Then you have a state of general confusion, or being manipulated by their desires. So this is the news cycles. People are constantly controlled by their fear of how bad the world is. And it would seem like I'm doing that right now. I'm playing into all the bad things going on. But this is more of an objective assessment of the list than just going through trying to bombard us with all the problems. We're just taking stock at the moment of all the problems going on in the world and trying to be serious about it. And also people being a state of general confusion would refer to there's just so much information in the world, and there's so many bad actors that it's hard to actually figure out what is, like, who is actually has my best interest in mind, and like which one should I listen to, and there's all these things that I shouldn't do or all these things that I should do, and there's just a state of confusion. And sometimes that's aided by addictions like sugar, where it's harder to think and all of this other stuff. And so I think a state of general confusion, like when one is not confused, it is so much better than when one is confused. A big one for me is the lack of adventure and imagination in life. And for me, this is one of those things where people say, oh, you're only supposed to have a certain amount of adventure and imagination in life. And life is supposed to be mostly mundane. And even if life could be more adventurous, we want it to be more mundane because that's what makes us feel comfortable. And I think that potentially is half valid. It might be entirely valid, but I think there is this degree that no one should be controlling, or there should be no law. I can't see a law that governs how much adventure and imagination a person can have. And I think it would, to me, it's a problem that more people don't have this sense of adventure and imagination, which also plays into the sense of purpose and meaninglessness. Like if they're just going to wake up tomorrow morning and do the same thing that they've always done in this empty cycle where they're not really making any traction, to me that's a lack of adventure and imagination, that they could wake up tomorrow and do some adventurous thing, some imaginative thing, like reading an awesome book and traveling the world, yet they can't because they're having to work their 9 to 5 or do something more mundane. To me, that's a problem because it's the understanding of how much better life could be, perhaps the desire for how much better life could be, yet the inability to do so because of the external factors. And you have people engaging in destructive behaviors, which for the most part are these problems. People engaging with these problems, maybe of their own accord, maybe because they're addicted to them, maybe because they grew up in a society or in a family that does them, such as gambling and smoking and all of those things, that for the most part, people even doing them agree these are probably destructive behaviors, yet they keep doing them. And in general, that's a problem because they, in their right mind, in the state when they're in the most clarity, they agree that they would rather not have these and they would rather have a better life, but they think, well, I can't actually have that great of a life, so I'm just going to engage with this stuff because this is okay. Then you have other problems like stress, being stressed out, feeling in your stomach of too much to do, of being anxious about something, that overall feeling of stress. And you can understand it because of all these problems going on. What are you going to do? And so one option is to get stressed, and it's totally understandable. And you have people being unnecessarily self-conscious about their looks, whether that be wrinkles, hairline, teeth, body image, all of this stuff, people being unnecessarily self-conscious about it. Because you can imagine someone who's perfectly confident in how they look, and maybe they look good because they take care of themselves. And then you have people who don't think that they look good, and that's probably because they're not taking care of themselves, or maybe some other reason. And you're like, there's these two spectrums, and it would seem that that's an issue. And then I would say one issue is that a lot of times people recognize this discrepancy between what life could be like and what life is. And they're told the answer to that is to make money, or to get rich, to become powerful, to have the right friends, to go on these cool excursions, and that will make them happy for some reason, and that will alleviate this feeling of discrepancy. Yet when you get there, it's like, wait a second, this isn't what I actually wanted. Like, I actually just wanted a nice existence. And it seems that people are being misled, and that could go into this state of confusion, or that could go into people trying to cheat people and trying to tell them, hey, get rich, but meanwhile you getting rich helps other people to get more rich, or however the situation works out. In general, getting rich does not solve any of these problems. Perhaps it makes it easier to solve any one of these problems, but it does not in fact solve any one of these problems. And you have a lack of access to good education. All around the world, talented people who could change the world because of their knowledge are unable to get the knowledge because of either clearly they don't have much education at all, or they want to learn and they're being taught, but the teacher and the way the system is set up isn't actually teaching them that well. Or maybe they don't really want to learn because they don't think it's important, or the family they grew up in doesn't think education is important. And yet the world is not conveying to them actually how important it is, and they're not conveying the knowledge in a way that the person would actually enjoy ingesting the knowledge and information. And you have a lack of open-mindedness, which would seem to be an issue for everyone, for not just the people that are closed-minded, but the people who are open-minded, being affected by the people that are closed-minded and not thinking for themselves, or not thinking that they could be wrong, or not thinking that maybe they don't know everything. This could be an issue. And one potential problem is that we don't have answers to all of physical reality, and we don't have answers to most of philosophical questions. We don't have an actual answer to most philosophical questions. And maybe this is the way it's supposed to be, because then we'll always have something to try to find a solution to. But at the same time, it would seem that if the solutions to those answers are holding us back from the world in which most of these problems are solved, then it would seem that we should try to solve them in order to solve all these problems, and therefore them not being solved is a problem. One potential problem is just the way that the world is set up. Sometimes people can spend their whole lives actually trying to make a difference. Maybe they're trying to solve one problem or another, or they're trying to solve a large part of these problems or something, but then they can't actually get anywhere, and maybe they did get somewhere, but then it vanished in a couple of years. And it just seems like that it's really difficult to actually make a difference, that the way the world is set up, we can spend so much work and effort trying to make the world a better place, but then maybe it improves a little bit, or we change one life and that's worth it. But why can't we actually just change the world and actually make it better? And I think this goes back to why can't we actually work on changing the world and actually get rid of all these problems? A lot of times it seems like we make excuses for all these problems. We say they will always exist. We say this religion says that this is because people are bad. We say other just reasons that you wouldn't have the good things if you didn't have the bad things. And maybe that's half true, maybe it's completely false. And so why would you depend on that being true in order to not actually make these problems better? Or maybe it's because, we're improving, but it just takes a long time. Why exactly does it take a long time? Who is giving the law that says making the world a better place takes forever and should never happen, basically? Who is giving us that law? To me, we are giving ourselves that law. And if at least one person says that law does not seem to make sense, then we can begin to change the paradigm. And I'm at least attempting to say, let's change that paradigm. I don't think that law has to be in place. Why can't we just speed up the change of the world into something actually better, and in an actually good way? Another fact about all of these problems is that there are statistics for them. Now, a lot of times statistics are arguable, and they kind of drown out the impact. And so the question is, does it actually matter? If one person is experiencing domestic abuse, or millions of people are experiencing domestic abuse, does it actually matter in principle? Is it still a problem depending on how many people are experiencing it? And I think in general, logically speaking, it's a problem either way. It doesn't matter how many people are experiencing that thing. So I think we could go through the statistics, and we could go through the statistics next year and say, look how they changed. Or we could say, look at these problems. These are problems, regardless of how many people are experiencing them, and let's look at them next year. Are any of the problems gone? Why do we have to say, well, we'll just aim for improvement? Sure, let's aim for improvement, but let's actually aim to fix the problems in a good way. And so this is our general state of reality. There are a lot of bad things happening. Sometimes we are experiencing them ourselves. Sometimes we know that millions of people are experiencing some level of problem. But in general, all of us have one of these problems. No matter how rich you are, no matter how fulfilled you try to be, all of us pretty much experience one of these problems. And so the question is, how do we go about, or like one potential question is, how do we go about actually fixing these problems? And then how do we go about fixing them in a way that actually makes sense and that doesn't hurt anyone in the process? And how do we go about fixing them in a way that doesn't take forever and actually solves the problem without hurting anyone? And so there is a lot of work to do, and that is the general state of the problems that are in our current reality. Thank you.